Dino, talk to me, will you not, about, just for a change, Viktor Gyokeres to Arsenal. Jordan Davis, our Arsenal man, very helpful earlier on when I was chatting to him in the office. He is all over it, as reporters up and down the country and across Europe are. This is the saga of the summer, no doubt, so far. Now, there's not any huge developments today. However, there has been another sort of it's moved on a notch with the old row that's going on between him and Sporting Lisbon at the moment. What's the latest?
Yeah, and I think we've got to the point where they would take a loan deal, or the Gyokeres camp would take a loan deal as a sort of meeting point, that it would be a loan with an obligation to buy.
Yeah.
So, but that then is another option that comes within a deal of this size. I think we're going to be talking about around about 68, 69 million, something like that.
That's it.
You know,
Charlie Wyatt, of course, wrote this week that Sporting are after 68.9 million, 60.3 up front, 8.6 in add-ons, and that Arsenal's sort of latest negotiating point even was that they would pay 64.6 in total, so 56 plus 8.6. But the sense being that no, we are Sporting are like, we know you want him. Yeah. We're not sticking to his 85 odd million pound release clause. Pay us what we want, and that it will get done eventually. But the latest being that the word out of Gyokeres' camp is that whatever happens, even if this Arsenal deal were to fall through, he's never playing for Sporting again. And if it doesn't, just sort of perhaps part of the negotiating thing and a bit of pressure from Gyokeres' camp onto Sporting to make them do the deal or push them close to agreeing a fee, saying, by the way, if you dig your heels in on this too much and he doesn't go to Arsenal, he's never playing for you again.
Yeah.
And we will demand a loan, very similar to what happened with Osimhen at Napoli. Is this good or bad for Arsenal fans?
Oh, good or bad? Good or bad? I mean, it's bad that it's just taking so long. Like, I'm not for a second going to say that 3 or 4 million quid is to be sniffed at, right? You know, it's silly, the fees we talk about in football compared to real life. But if they
it's
really
all subjective,
want,
isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But if they really want him, then get it done. Just get it done and move on to the next one. I mean, if it is 3 or 4 million you're talking about, you're got to
draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, but you're basically
for
3 or 4 million pounds. You're talking about one extra round of the Champions League.
Yeah,
that's what it means. A place in the Premier League.
Yeah.
So if they're not confident that he's going to take them to that next level, that they can pay 3 or 4 million pound extra to meet the valuation, then they've got the wrong guy.
Yeah, but they've only got about £7 million in extra prize money to gain from the Prem, haven't they?
I think it ends up getting done. I think Arsenal, it's obvious Arsenal don't want to be seen to just bowing down and buckling and just saying we'll just pay what everyone says.
Which is fair.
Absolutely fair, because that's the route that Man United went down for years when we talked about the Man United tax, and it was just quote 20 million more and Man United will pay it.
And Sporting are also going, well, look,
yeah,
85 million is a release clause.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't have to.
No, he signed that release clause, by the way, as well. So
exactly.
It's all a bit messy. And look, he would go on loan to another European club, not just Arsenal. And he should make that clear that he would be open to, just as long as he doesn't have to go back to Sporting. So it's ended a bit sour. But look, is he going to be the man to take Arsenal to a title next year?
That's what I was going to ask you, Dino. Do you think the bitter way in which these negotiations are taking place, and to be fair to Arsenal, I don't think really it's bitter, or it's not at all. It's not really bitter on their side of things. They're just saying, look, we would like this player. This is how much we think he's worth. Negotiating in the usual fashion. The fallouts obviously happened between Gyokeres and Sporting, particularly Federico Varandas, who came out the other
very
week.
Vocal, yeah.
So do you think, though, when negotiations or transfers happen in this manner, do you think that puts extra pressure, particularly as a lot of the bitterness appears to be coming from Gyokeres' camp? Does that put extra pressure on him next year to perform, if he does go to Arsenal, to be the man that he obviously thinks he is?
I think that if you're going to go for 70 million and as a striker to the Premier League, you're under a fair amount of pressure straight away anyway. So I don't know about extra pressure. I think he clearly believes in himself. And, despite the sorry time he had at Brighton and then the move to Coventry and the different places he's been, but he's worked very, very hard to get to where he is.
Yep.
And he's worked on his physique, he's worked on his physicality, his pace, and he was always a goal scorer. There was always a goal scorer in there somewhere. So I think he'll be backing himself to do it. I don't. Again, these guys don't get to elite level performance if they're not fairly confident in themselves and not too worried about pressure.
We would have surely said the same thing about Rasmus Højlund.
Yeah, we probably would.
I
think this guy's been around the block a bit more than Rasmus Højlund. So, but look, it is the one. It is the one for Arsenal fans where they're wondering if this is the right move and the person that's going to take them to the title. Because, quite frankly, as we'll talk about a lot during this year, if Arteta doesn't do it this year, then when are you going to do it? And and if as we've said all the way through, they're just a striker short, then you can kind of see why Arsenal are taking a bit of time with it, because they need it to be right. This is they're not going to buy him and Sesko. Sesko being around about the same value,
85 million.
They're not going to go and they're not going to go down the Osimhen route. Obviously, they would have loved Isak. That's no secret. They would have loved Isak, but nobody's paying
a Rolls Royce.
Yeah, absolutely. But nobody's paying that 150 million to Newcastle at the moment. So if they see this guy as the one, which it seems it is, as it's edging closer, then it's got to work. Otherwise, Arsenal are left with a £70 million player that hasn't quite worked out, and I would say that the Emirates might turn a little bit next year.
Quite. Just one thing to be a little bit more positive about for Arsenal fans is a deal that has been done. Is Christian Nørgaard. We spoke about this on Transfers Exposed the week before last. Actually, we reported it in FC in the Sun at the time, and Christian Nørgaard to Arsenal expected to be announced on Thursday. A base deal of around 9 to 10 million quid, raising to around 12 with some add-ons. So good news for Arsenal fans there. Solid player there. One thing, interesting one, Dino, Sun exclusive this afternoon up on the website. Arsenal willing to include a player, if needs be, to get Eze over the line from Crystal Palace. Now, somewhat difficult at this early stage to say exactly who that player is. It's believed to be, or Sunsport understands it to be, a player with some who's played a few games for Arsenal, some Premier League experience, but very much a periphery sort of player. Difficult at this stage to speculate. Well, it's not difficult to. We can speculate, but
we could make a list. We don't know at the moment. So.
With that, obviously, I heard Sean and Charlie talking about it on the show last week. Do you think, especially in the PSR age, that Ethan Nwaneri was mentioned? Now, at this stage, we can't say whether or not it's him. Do you think a player of that type that Crystal Palace would be interested in that, or with a star asset like Eze? Do you think they're just going to be going, look, we're not interested?
Well, if it was Ethan Nwaneri, they'd obviously be interested, but I just don't see it. I mean, that'd be craziness, wouldn't it, for Arsenal to...
some reports suggesting that he's demanding a certain amount of minutes.
Yeah, well, if he's doing that, then he's stepped one step above his station, obviously. But I just... The thing that this screams of to me...
He plays more at Palace, doesn't he?
Yes, yeah. Oh, of course he does, yeah. But there's Palace and Arsenal, and why are we talking about Eze coming out of Palace to go to Arsenal or Tottenham or whatever? It's Champions League football, right?
Yeah.
So that's the difference. That's the elite level. Of course, Brian and Burmo wasn't interested in Champions League football. He just wanted more money. But not that I'm bitter or that one. He hasn't even signed for United yet, and I'm already bitter. But yeah, the Eze thing, all it points to me is that Arsenal aren't willing to meet the valuation.
Yeah.
If Arsenal were trying to do a deal for a player to be included, they're not willing to pay the 68 million quid, which we know it's quite a complex deal because there's money to previous clubs to Palace, including QPR.
Yeah.
And it's a structured deal as well, and Palace want it paid in a particular way. If Arsenal aren't willing to do that, then it feels a little bit like the next option is, what about this player that we might not need? And it's quite rare those happen, those transfers. And I think there's a lot more of clubs dealing with players to and from each other. But you're talking about homegrown players here, so from, as you mentioned, a PSR perspective, they're worth more on a balance sheet when they're homegrown, because their contract's value is larger, and it's pure profit. Yeah. So until we get a real name of who which the guys are working on, to see who Arsenal may well offer in exchange, Palace are just going to sit there and go, the fee.
Yeah.
And if Eze is wanting Arsenal instead of Tottenham, And that, that
Let it
no,
go, will ya?
no, but that's fine. But that's fine because that's different to Brian and Burmo. Okay, that is different. That is, if he's going to go and say I've got more chance of winning a Premier League title at Arsenal than I have at Spurs, that's absolutely the case, isn't it?
I think that probably is the
that's
case.
the case. So that's okay. But but he's probably sat there now thinking, well, I've got two very, very good options on the table here, and they're in a position where Palace hold the cards and say, I would imagine Tottenham it's the case that Arsenal and Tottenham know what the salary's going to be.
Yeah.
They know what the deal is.
Yeah.
It's just a case of whether you can get a deal agreed with Palace. And Ez has probably sat there thinking, well, I'll wait for Arsenal to make their case, and he knows he's got a very, very good option in Spurs. Champions League football and an increase in pay and a bigger, spotlight on him in a World Cup year, then he's in a pretty good place, isn't he?
Yeah, potentially Arsenal sort of testing the water, perhaps, or testing Palace's resolve to see if they may be interested.
Don't rule out Liverpool. Not Liverpool. Don't rule out Newcastle coming to that party as well at some stage, because depending on what happens with Anthony Gordon.
Yeah, you sense frenzy incoming, don't you?